Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. Well, if your garden is anything like ours, this time of year you are just bursting at the seams with cherry tomatoes. That's what's happening right here on the homestead, and I can tell you that even though I love to eat tomatoes, there comes a time during the growing season where even I can't keep up with eating all of the cherry tomatoes that we get. Now, I do give quite a few away. My mom loves to eat tomatoes as much as I do. Our daughter Grace and her husband, they like to eat tomatoes as well. But even with giving some away, I still always end up with a lot extra. So today we're going to actually be doing one of the few things that I like to do to preserve whole cherry tomatoes, and that is that we are going to be making refrigerator cherry tomato pickles. To me, these are even better than pickles made with cucumbers because they're made with tomatoes. You guys know how much I love tomatoes, so let's get started on today's project. I am going to be using only one variety of tomato today. These are one of my favorite types of cherry tomatoes. They're actually more of a grape tomato. These are called Juliets. The reason that I like these is because they're a really firm tomato. They last really well, and the skins on them rarely crack in the heat. We've had about a week and a half now of temperatures right around 100 degrees, the upper 90s, low hundreds, and these Juliet tomatoes, I haven't had a single one yet that I've had to toss out because they've cracked out in the garden. Most of the other cherry tomatoes that we're growing this year, I'll have to say, really are not doing nearly as well as these. And next year, I will be going back to growing almost exclusively these Juliets and my other favorite, which is the large red cherry. So today we're going to be making two different types of refrigerator pickles. One is going to be kind of a basic dill refrigerator pickled tomato, and the other one is going to be a spicy version of the same thing. I'm thinking with the tomatoes that I have here in this colander, which I've already washed, I've rinsed them off really well. Since these are from our garden, I know they weren't sprayed with anything anyway, but I did wash them well just to get any bug poop or anything off of them that might be on them. And I'm thinking with this amount right here that we're going to be able to make at least 3 half-gallon containers of tomatoes. Now, once these are done, these will actually last in the refrigerator for 3 months or maybe even a little more. Chances are in our house, they won't last that long because I'll eat them. But if we were to put these in the refrigerator, they will last up to 3 months. So this is a great thing to do, especially even later in the season. If you know your first frost is coming and you have a lot of extra tomatoes, go ahead and make a recipe like this because you can put these into the refrigerator and you can still be eating tomatoes out of your garden in the middle of winter. All right, let's get started on today's project. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put some of our spices into our jars. I went out to the garden just before I started this video and I harvested some dill that we still have growing. I wish you guys could smell this because it smells really, really good. So we're going to put dill into 2 of the jars. The spicy variety, I'm not going to be putting any dill in, but we are going to put dill into 2 of these jars. Let me grab a scissors here. We're basically just going to cut the flowers off and let them fall into the jars. Now, any of the dill that has a thicker stem like this, we're actually going to cut off right up by the flower so that we can put that into the jar. And then the stem, we'll actually cut that into smaller pieces. These are pretty woody at this point. Now, there is still a ton of flavor packed into these stems, but I don't want to put this whole long piece in there because it can actually poke into the tomatoes and rip the tomatoes. And we want to keep these as whole as we can in the jars. So first I'm going to put all of the flowers in. And maybe we won't even have to put the stems in these. I might just save the stems and either put them in the freeze dryer and then powder them, or just let them dry out and powder them. We do have a lot of dill growing, so I'm not afraid of not using the stems in this recipe right now. I'm going to put just a little bit more into this jar because personally, in my opinion, if you're going to be making something dill, you might as well make it with a lot of dill. All right, so I think that's good for that first jar. Let's go ahead and put a bunch into this second jar as well. think this will be the last piece. I think that'll be good. All right, so we've got our dill in the 2 jars. The other one we're going to leave empty for right now. Let's go ahead and move the dill out of the way so we have a little more room to work. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a couple seasonings to each of these jars. We're going to be adding some mustard seed. I'm going to put 2 teaspoons in each jar. Now we buy all of our spices in bulk through Azure Standard. I know we've talked to you guys about that in the past. If you're not buying things in bulk from Azure, I recommend that you totally check them out because they deliver once a month, kind of a bulk delivery to an area close to your home. And then you just go get it right off the truck, and it's a great way to be able to save a lot of money, especially on organic things, but on either organic and non-organic, it's a really good way to save and to be able to get things in kind of bigger quantities. So we're going to put 2 teaspoons in each jar. And then we're also going to be putting 2 teaspoons of black peppercorn in each jar as well. Now, if you wanted to can this recipe, you can also do that. You can water bath can this recipe. I prefer to do them just like this in the refrigerator because they last a long time in the refrigerator, and I go through them fast enough that it doesn't really pay to go to all the extra work of canning them. You definitely can them as well as doing them this way. All right, the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to be putting some garlic. We're going to put 2 cloves of garlic in each jar. Now we like to use one of these silicone garlic peelers. If you haven't used one of these, you really got to try one out. You just put your clove of garlic inside of this little silicone tube, roll it around, and just like that, it's completely peeled. I am going to smash these just a little bit. We're going to put 2 cloves into each jar. Now that we have our spices and our dill in our jars, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to dice up our peppers. Now, like I said, we're only going to be making 1 jar full that has peppers in it, and what my plan is to add some tomatoes, then some peppers, tomatoes, peppers, tomatoes, peppers, until it's filled up to the top. So I don't think I'm going to need all of these peppers. I think I'm going to add just probably like that many there. We'll set these off to the side. We're going to be using 2 different varieties of peppers today. The first are these right here, which are Hungarian hot wax peppers. These are pretty darn spicy. They're spicier than a jalapeno for sure, but not as hot as like a ghost pepper or a habanero. They're still what I consider tolerable, but they are pretty darn spicy. Then we're also going to be using jalapenos. We have some kind of standard jalapenos that are out in our greenhouse, and they've already turned red. That's these here. And then we're trying a new variety this year that we've actually picked up from the Amish greenhouse near where we live. And these are called mammoth jalapenos. And I would say so far they're living up to their name. This actually isn't even one of the bigger ones. There was a branch that broke off and this was on there, so I brought this in. But there are some that are probably half again this big, which is going to be really good for making some stuffed jalapenos, I can tell you that. So I'm going to dice all of these peppers up and just put them in a bowl for now. And then as we're filling our jar up with our tomatoes, we can layer those in there. Now I'm just going to be doing these in rings. And I am going to be leaving the seeds in because I do want these to end up being pretty spicy. Now if you want to, when you're doing something like this, you can definitely wear gloves. I prefer to just wash my hands well when I'm done. And yes, a few times having that attitude has come back to bite me in the butt, as they say, because I've rubbed my eyes with hot peppers on my hands, and that's not always very fun. Peppers are all cut up. I tried really hard when I was out there to get a variety of colors That's going to look really awesome inside of the jars. And let's face it, when you're making a recipe, you want it to look as good as you can. So I'm going to put these off to the side for now. Let's go ahead and get our brine started. It's a real simple brine. It's actually just going to be vinegar, water, and salt. These are not going to be sweet in any way. You can add some sugar to these if you want to. We don't eat sugar, so I'm not going to be adding any sugar to these. You could add stevia if you want to. A lot of times when I'm making refrigerator cucumber pickles, I will add some stevia because I do like a little bit of sweetness in those. But for these, it's just going to be water, vinegar, and salt. For our brine today, we're going to be using white vinegar. Now, if you prefer to use apple cider vinegar, you can definitely do that. So I'm going to start by making just 8 cups of brine. I'm not exactly sure how much it's going to take by the time we have these all packed full of stuff. I can always make more, but I don't really want to waste any. So I'm going to start by using 4 cups of vinegar. And I'm also going to use 4 cups of water. Now, we have very good well water here on our property, so I'm just going to be using tap water. If you live somewhere where your tap water isn't great, you might want to use bottled water or filtered water. But our tap water here is amazing. So we're using equal parts vinegar and water. And then I'm also going to be adding some pickling salt. You could use kosher salt as well if you would prefer, but I'm going to be using pickling salt today for this recipe. And I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of pickling salt. So basically 1 tablespoon for every 2 cups of liquid. And I'm going to take this over to the stove and I'm going to get this heating up. I don't want to bring this to a boil because I don't want to cook the tomatoes or the peppers when I put it in the jars. I do want to make it warm enough that all of the salt will dissolve in here, and so that when we pour it over, it helps bring out the flavors of all of the herbs and spices that we just put into the jars. So you can just kind of guess on the exact temperature, but as long as it's not hot enough to cook, but is long enough to kind of steep everything that's in the jars. While that's heating up, which occasionally I'll go over and stir that to make sure the salt is mixed up, I'm going to start getting the tomatoes ready to put in the jars. There's really not a whole lot to do. Like I said, I've already washed these. But what I am going to do is, as I'm putting them into the jars, I'm going to take a toothpick and I'm going to poke a hole all the way through the tomato this way, and then turn it and poke a hole all the way through this way. So there's 4 holes in each tomato. If you really want to, you could take the cores out, but these tomatoes, these cherry tomatoes that I'm using, have such a tiny little core, I'm not worried about that at all. So I'm going to put my 4 holes in, and I'm going to put it in the jar. And I'm just going to do that until all of our jars are full. And like I said, on the jar that we're doing the peppers in, I'm going to also probably, get up to about here, then put some peppers, and then put more tomatoes, and then some peppers. And we're just going to do that all the way up. I'm actually going to have Sarah come and help me do this so that this part can go a little bit faster. all of our jars are filled. Look how amazing those look. Especially this one with the peppers. I just think it looks really cool. All right, so we're going to get these filled up. Our brine is heated up. I'm going to attempt to just pour it right out of this pot into the jars. And we'll have to see if we'll have to make more brine. We want to make sure that everything is covered inside of the jars. Whew, I can smell those peppers as I'm pouring it in that one. Yes, we're definitely going to have to make a little bit more brine. Now, if you're going to make this and want to can this, remember that I'm making this in half-gallon jars. But if you wanted to can this, you would need to make these in quart jars instead of half-gallon jars. You can't can with these half-gallon jars. All right, I'm going to make just a little bit more brine, and then we'll finish filling up this final jar. All right, we're going to go ahead and cover these up because these are going in the refrigerator. We can just use these plastic lids. We don't need to use regular canning lids and rings. And look at that. Just like that, we were able to preserve all of these tomatoes for at least the next 3 months. You guys, now is the hardest part of this entire recipe, and that is waiting until they are done to actually try them. Ideally, you're going to want to wait at least a week before you try them. You could probably get away with doing 3 or 4 days. A week will make the taste even that much better, but let's face it, how many of us could walk past this every day, see this sitting in the refrigerator, and wait an entire week to try one? Fat chance that it's going to happen here, I can tell you that. So, you guys, I hope you will give this recipe a try. You can also do this recipe with green tomatoes at the end of the season. If you know your final frost is coming up, and you have a bunch of green cherry tomatoes still on your plants, go ahead and pick them and try a recipe like this, because this is a great way to use up those tomatoes so you don't feel like you wasted them at the end of the season. I am really excited about trying these spicy ones. We're actually going to be going over to my mom and dad's for dinner tonight, and I think I'm going to take them a jar of these as well, because like I said, my mom likes his tomatoes maybe even more than I do, but I don't know if that's possible. So I'm going to take her a jar of these to put in her refrigerator, and I guess we'll find out which one of us can wait an entire week to give them a try. You guys, I hope you enjoy videos like this. I hope that this gives you some ideas. You can play around with putting different herbs in here. If you have basil in your garden right now, some basil would be great in there. Whatever you want to try, the spice flavors that you like, go ahead and give it a try. A real basic pickling brine recipe like this can be used in so many different ways. Let me know if you have any additional recipes that you guys have tried in the past as ways to preserve whole cherry tomatoes like this. I'm always looking for new ideas to try. Hey, if you're enjoying videos like this, don't forget that the absolute best way that you can help us here is just by sharing our videos. If you did enjoy this video, if you're going to try this recipe, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button already, go ahead and do that before you leave as well. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care, and God bless.